This is Everblue 2, a scuba simulator on the PlayStation 2. A game that, while it has a very interesting concept to base the game around, it feels like it ultimately misses its most basic of goals. Now, the story starts off with a scuba diver by the name of Leo getting caught in a shipwreck, and now he must go on a series of dives to acquire various artifacts and other loot from both shipwrecks and the bottom of the sea in order to help various islanders. And along the way, there's sort of an evil salvage organization that you have to defeat by beating at various dives, because if you don't, they do evil things and something. The plot is really minimal and honestly not very important, as the plot itself is really more of a framing device around the basic gameplay, which is exploration of the ocean. And while exploration of the ocean seems to be the main focus of Everblue 2, it feels like it hits a major stumbling block on a fundamental level, which is, of course, exploration. And I think it does so on two fronts. First and foremost, when you're on a dive, while done in the first person, which allows for the greatest sense of immersion, navigation is done on a two-dimensional plane. Essentially, your character is constantly looking at the ground, and while you can look in different directions, you'll always be sort of skimming the bottom of the ocean. And while I feel two-dimensional movement was a conscious decision to simplify the control scheme for open water diving, by taking away full control of movement of the player, you're ultimately removing immersion. Now, the second front, in which it feels like it hurts exploration, is simply the, for lack of a better term, gaminess. And what I mean by this is, there are RPG elements regarding your character's health and his basic equipment. A bag, which is used to store the various things you salvage from a wreck, which has a set amount of weight you can hold at any one time. Flippers, which control speeds, but both of those things are luxury items. As you get better gear, you'll be able to carry more and swim faster, and that's fine. However, the other two pieces, the wetsuit and your oxygen tank, control really where you can go. For the oxygen tank gives you X amount of time that you can spend at any depth, and the diving suit controls how far you can dive. So ultimately, until you get better gear, you're stuck in the shallows, which means you really can't explore as much as you'd honestly like to. And I think that this was done to prevent players from going into areas which they might not be able to handle the various hazards, or simply to prevent players from seeing a location that isn't relevant until later in the plot. It really makes this feel less like Everblue and more like Neverblue, because of how limited your scope of exploration really is. Now, outside of open water diving, there's also wrecks, which come into play during various parts of the story. Wrecks such as a sunken airplane and ferry. And I think exploring them is the fun part, because the restriction of two-dimensional movement is not only removed, but these wrecks are incredibly atmospheric. They're always very dark, and you're never really sure what you're going to find down there. I mean, half the time when I look down a hallway into the darkness, I swear I'm honestly just waiting to see like a zombie shark just come at me and just take me out instantly. It's really atmospheric and creepy. But you can't spend too much time in any one of these because your air and health will constantly be draining. So you have to work quickly to find what you were sent to salvage and bring it back to the surface, as well as look for any other loot you might be able to fit in your bag so you can sell later. So while I think that the main exploration mechanics of this game are more or less completely counterintuitive to the main concept of a open ocean diving game, the wrecks themselves almost make up for it. They're gorgeous, and they're just a ton of fun to explore. Now, another key mechanic of this game is your sonar. Because you're looking for various objects, you have to search them out using a sonar which can be equipped with various modules, such as a wood detector, don't ask me how that works, or a metal detector. These will help you find specific pieces of loot that you're supposed to be looking for to fulfill various salvaging requests. However, in the open ocean, unlike the wrecks, you basically need to rely on your sonar, because finding anything is more or less a complete crapshoot. Whereas you can visibly see any sort of salvageable material on a wreck, it's completely invisible and hidden to the eye out in the open ocean. Thus, once again, kind of removing you from the sense of immersion that you would get from a realistic diving experience. But while you're out there, you also have to deal with sharks, poisonous fish, eels, and the like, which do in turn make this rather calm experience into a bit of a tense one. The soundtrack is, by and large, mostly tropical stuff, and you'll only be really listening to the soundtrack above water, as when you're on a dive, all you really can hear is the sound of your own breath being drawn from your oxygen tank. This adds to the sense of isolation that this gives you, which in turn makes diving a little bit creepy, despite how beautiful the world you're surrounded by is. And once you're inside a wreck, it's also beautiful, but in a haunting way, because you are essentially scavenging in a derelict place that had once held many people. Now they're gone, and you're alone in there. And that definitely makes it very tense and atmospheric, but in a beautiful way. Now I'm going to be completely honest with you. This is one of the few games I'm reviewing that I actually haven't finished. And that's mainly because my disc only works about 10% of the time. That's also why the audio is probably sounding kind of bad, because I had to cut it together on my own. And I think while it stumbles on a fundamental level, the idea that this game is based upon is not without merit. And I think if you like what you see, I would suggest looking into Everblue too. However, if you think this looks good, but you're not so big on the whole gaminess of it, and you really just want more exploration and more or less just a calm, fun look at underwater life, I would suggest checking out the game's sequel, Endless Ocean, on the Wii, which I think pulled off the exploration a little bit better, despite the fact that it was also very restrictive.